Remember in my last video for episode 7, I said this? But I know one thing, when we get to next week's episode, if I don't see Yahya Abdul-Mateen in the blue makeup and I see his ass and his dick swinging back and forth as Dr. Manhattan, I'm going to be very disappointed. Well, Lord, I wasn't ready. Oh, my heart. So episode 8, the penultimate episode of this Watchmen series, entitled A God Walks Into a Bar. Get it? Because Angela's last name is Angela Abar, and he's also literally walking into a bar. Clever. But I'm just like, well, he did a little bit more than walk into a bar. But anyway, so this episode finally reveals the whole backstory of how Dr. Manhattan, who has been revealed in last week's episode to be her husband Cal, played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen, how they finally first met. And not only that, it revealed a whole bunch of other stuff in this episode. So as Philip DeFranco always says, let's just jump right into it. So yeah, so you get to see Dr. Manhattan. I guess you can't call him Cal at this point because he's not Cal yet. He's in a suit and it's during some type of Dr. Manhattan celebration in Vietnam. And so he picks up a Dr. Manhattan mask because he says he doesn't want to be recognized, but I'm like, but you're still blue. But anyway, so he picks up a Dr. Manhattan mask and he walks into a bar and he meets Angela Abar and he asks her out for dinner. And naturally, Angela doesn't know who this guy is. She thinks he's just a regular like Dr. Manhattan cosplayer, so she kind of brushes him off. Even with her ignoring him and not really paying that much attention to him, you can instantly feel the chemistry between these two characters. That's why I feel like it was great casting. Like they just ooze chemistry off of each other. And you can feel like as Dr. Manhattan is trying to court her and get her attention, that she's somewhat intrigued because he is somewhat interesting. He's someone, she could tell that there's something different about him, even if she doesn't believe that he's Dr. Manhattan. And so in this episode, you get more of a glimpse and an explanation of how Dr. Manhattan's powers work. And it's kind of a throwback to a moment that happens in the comics where he's going through different segments of his life where it's like, it's 1985 and I'm doing such and such, or it's 1930 whatever and I'm experiencing this, or it's 1960 whatever and I'm in the Vietnam War. How he would experience his memories all at the same time. And this episode kind of leans more into that. That shows like basically he experiences time in a very different way than us humans. For Angela, the way he experiences life and experiences time will be very frustrating. And I can admit that in some ways it was kind of frustrating. And then also it goes back to something that happened in the comics where why him and Lori clashed because of his concept of time being very frustrating to her. He's experiencing all these different things at the same time instead of like being in the moment. And so Manhattan is basically explaining to Angela that he's there to woo her. He's there to court her because he's already in love with her because of the way he experiences time. He says to her like, for him, there is no concept of before. It is what it is. So she's trying to ask him like, there was no moment that made you go, this is the moment that I loved you. And he's like, right now is the moment. I'm right here in front of you. And so most of this episode is him trying to convince her to go out with him the next night. And then on top of that, like, he doesn't lie to her at all. He comes clean, like, from the moment they meet. Like, he's Dr. Manhattan, and he's explaining himself to her, but he's also wanting to keep her on her toes. And he says to her, like, I want you to remain unsure until you agree to go out with me tomorrow night. So he doesn't automatically, like, prove to her that he's Dr. Manhattan, aside from him trying to say, well, I can see the future, and this is what's going to happen, and we're going to be together for 10 years. We're going to adopt kids. And throughout the episode, you see moments throughout all of their 10 years together, like how it was Angela's idea for him to appear in the body of Cal. And I really liked how they directed and how they wrote this episode and how it wasn't very linear and straightforward. Like, I like how they had flashbacks to conversations with Angela and then they jumped to the future, but then they jumped back to a conversation that he brought up with Angela. For example, when Angela says to him in the bar that he has a fantastic imagination. And then in that scene, he says, a friend of mine 6 months from now is telling me I have an incredible lack of imagination. Then fast forward in the episode, you find out that friend or acquaintance is Adrian Veidt. And he says to Dr. Manhattan, you have a lack of imagination. But then he jumps back to that previous moment where him and Angela first met. And he's like, somebody's actually telling me right now, I have a fantastic imagination. And so I just love the way this episode played out. And this episode does play into the fact that even though Dr. Manhattan is being played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen, a black man, which I love that the most powerful man in the universe is a black man, he's technically not even a black man because they do keep his comic book origins in the fact that John Osterman in his human form before he was Dr. Manhattan is of Jewish descent. And I find it kind of rather poetic that the most powerful man in the universe is a Jewish and a black man, especially when you get to the overall theme of this series being about dealing with white supremacy. And two of the most hated groups that white supremacists do despise are Jews and black people. Even if you think about the protests in like Charlottesville, Virginia, where they were chanting the Jews will not replace racist. White supremacists hate Jews and black people. They probably hate black people more than they hate Jews, but I find it pretty poetic that the most powerful man in the universe is both Jewish and black. And one thing that I was kind of thinking about, and I'm actually glad that they referenced this, when Dr. Manhattan went to go visit Adrian Veidt, and I'll get to that in a second, but when Dr. Manhattan went to go visit Adrian Veidt, Adrian kind of brought up that Dr. Manhattan is basically appropriating a black man. He's like, you know, it's not the 80s anymore. This type of appropriation isn't cool anymore. It's very problematic. And interestingly enough, I was thinking to myself while watching the show, I was like, is this kind of problematic in the sense that a white man is putting himself in the body of a black man? And why is it that you think about a movie like Get Out, where white people were trying to inject their minds into the bodies of a black man? Why is that not okay, but you got something like this that is okay? And thinking about it more and also talking about it with other people, the reason this is different is because Dr. Manhattan specifically said, like, I don't care what I look like. You're the one that's going to ultimately determine what human form I choose. And I'm doing it for the comfort and benefit of you. I'm not trying to make myself feel better or fulfill some type of fetishization or fantasy or whatever. It's for the benefit of another person as opposed to the benefit of myself. And also another thing that I loved about that is, considering that this is the man that she wants to marry, she would prefer for him to be another black man. And that's something that you don't really see when in terms of like television shows. Like more times than not, especially with genre shows, it's very rare that you see black on black romance. Every time you have a character of color in a relationship in TV, they always have to inject some type of whiteness into a relationship. And that's not saying I have a problem with interracial relationships. I don't. But when it comes to like portrayals on television, it's very rare for you to get black on black love. Again, specifically with genre fantasy television. Even think about something like Princess and the Frog. Her husband, her prince, wasn't another black man. He was Middle Eastern, but he wasn't black. So you think about, we're getting the first black Disney princess. We don't have a black Disney prince. And then even with interracial relationships, they never show characters of color loving each other. It's always a white person with another race. They hardly ever show a black person with an Asian person, or an Asian person with a Native American, or a Hispanic person with an Asian person. It's always white and someone else. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, jump into the moment that I said in last week's episode and that I teased in the beginning of this review. So there's a moment that Angela and Dr. Manhattan get into a fight, because almost the same reason why him and Lori got into a fight. He's always telling them what the future is going to be and what's going to happen. Even though they try to fight it, it ends up coming to pass anyway. And so Angela tells him to leave. And so he leaves and he goes to Adrian Veidt's place in Antarctica or the North Pole. I don't remember exactly where it is. I think it's the North Pole, but I don't remember. But anyway, so in going there, him and Angela had just finished having sex. And of course, Dr. Manhattan has no shame going anywhere naked. And so in the body of Yahya Abdul-Mateen, he goes to Adrian Veidt's place completely in his birthday suit. And I was just like, good God almighty. Like, I don't know if it was a body double. Now granted, actors really have no problem showing their ass. So more than likely that was Yahya Abdul-Mateen's ass. And I was just like, it's so beautiful. But then when they got to the moment that they actually went for it, they showed the full Manhattan or the Excalibur. I was like, and based on interviews that I've read of Yahya Abdul-Mateen, he basically said like him being naked was liberating and he decided to go for it. And there was an intimacy counselor or whatever on set that determined what he was and what he wasn't comfortable with. So based on that, I'm assuming him being naked as Dr. Manhattan was all him. And all I could think of, I'm just like, we're not worthy. We're not worthy. I rewound that scene like a couple of times. So when he says to Veidt, like, would you rather I put on some clothes? I'm like, no, keep the clothes off, please. But you do find out that it was, in fact, Dr. Manhattan that sent Adrian Veidt to Europa. And jumping back a little bit, he's the one that actually created all the Mr. Phillipses and Miss Crookshanks after he left to go create life from the original Watchmen comic. He basically made like a computer type program, a decoy on Mars, so people would believe he's on Mars so they're not looking for him elsewhere. And he went to create life on Europa. And he made it into a paradise. He wanted it to be a better place than Earth. But these creatures that he created they weren't about self-aggrandizement. They were all about pleasing other people. Because they were only looking to please their master, he became bored with his creations. And so, in a very cruel way, he just up and left. And Adrian Veidt's goal was always to create a utopia. So he was a little disappointed that despite doing what he did and killing 3 million people and creating the giant squid, humans are still creating bombs and nuclear weapons. And he's like, I don't understand why you people feel the need to make more bombs. And Dr. Manhattan is telling him, like, in an unironic way, it makes them feel safer. And so, because Dr. Manhattan created what he believes to be a utopia on Europa, Adrian Veidt thought this is what he always wanted, because he asked Dr. Manhattan, will I ever see my utopia? And Dr. Manhattan says, yes, you will. So he sends him to Europa. And we find out that he's been there since 2009. But before Dr. Manhattan sends Adrian away, he requires his assistance. And this is kind of how you know that Dr. Manhattan loves Angela more than he loves Laurie and even the original Silk Spectre, because he's going above and beyond and trying to make Angela feel better about dating him. He, being a god, is trying to make himself more worthy of Angela's love. And so because of that, not wanting to make the same mistakes that he made with Laurie or the original Silk Spectre, he went to Adrian Veidt to try to help him become more human. And so, almost in a throwback to the original comic where they go to Adrian Veidt to try to stop his master plan, and he says to them, like, you really think I would tell you my master plan if I didn't already did it? I did it like 30 minutes ago. And the same callback to that, he tells Dr. Manhattan, like, I created this device 30 years ago. And so basically, the device that you saw Angela pull out of his head in the last episode, that came from Adrian Veidt. And it was something that would make him forget that he's even a god, that he's Dr. Manhattan. And he irradiated with tachyon particles. So that's why Dr. Manhattan never knew about it in the first place. And so Adrian tells him, like, look, if you have any unfinished business that you need to take care of, do it now, because once this goes into your head, you're not gonna have any memories of who you are. It's gonna be basically like you started with a clean slate. You're not gonna forget your cognitive functions like how to walk and talk, but you're gonna forget your name, your birthday, all of that. And it's only in life or death situations that your powers will activate out of sheer reflex, which answers a question that we had earlier in the season where the 7th Cavalry attacked Angela and you saw her push Cal out the way. Right before one of those members was about to shoot Angela, the scene cut to black and then she woke up in the hospital. You're just like, wait, what happened? And then where was Cal? You find out in this episode that Cal's powers activated and he essentially disintegrated that 7th Cavalry member and saved Angela's life. He decides to go to Angela's grandfather, and that's how Will even learns that he has a granddaughter. And also with that, like, it's interesting because of how time travel works. Like the chicken or the egg theory, it was Angela in the future that actually told Will in the past that Judd Crawford was even a member of Cyclops and had a clan robe in his closet. Because jumping to the future when Dr. Manhattan's standing on water, and that's something that they reference, which obviously is going to play out in the next episode. He's like, you need to see me standing on water. He tells Angela that he's talking to her grandfather right now, 10 years into the past. And so she's like, how did you know about Judd Crawford? And then so Dr. Manhattan asked him, and he's like, who the hell is Judd Crawford? So in a great giant paradox type of way, she started this whole thing. And this brings me to a question and something that I'm confused about in terms of how Dr. Manhattan's powers work, in terms of his perception of time and reality. Because he always says that what he sees is going to come to pass no matter what actions anyone takes. There's nothing that you can do about it. But at the same time, I'm just like, really? Like, the way it's being portrayed in the show, it seems like if you actually do try to do something to prevent the future that you see, you can actually prevent it. The future that you see, and this is a comic book, so in a very comic booky Marvel DC type of way, it seems like the future that you do see is one possible future of a multiverse of futures. Like, for example, when Dr. Manhattan says that the 7th Cavalry is already outside and they're going to take me in a tachyon cannon and there's nothing that you can do about it. No matter what you do, it's an inevitable possibility that I'm going to get taken. But part of me is like, but if you know that, just like how Phoebe would do in Charm, she would see the future and she would work to prevent that future. And more times than not, she would change the future. If you made yourself an active participant in the future that you see, you more than likely could have changed that outcome. For example, if you know they have a tachyon cannon right outside, why not just wave your hand and zap the cannon away? It seems like because he sees the future, he's working on doing everything he can to make that future happen. Even going to another example of the fight that him and Angela had when Angela tells him to leave. And he's like, we're gonna have a fight. We're already in the fight. There's nothing we can do to change it. It seems like he was saying things knowing it's gonna rile Angela up to put them in the fight, instead of saying, I see a future where we're gonna fight, but I'm just not gonna say anything. Because Angela's like, no, we're not gonna fight. We're not gonna fight. Don't tell me what's gonna happen. Like, if he would just say, I see a potential future with us fighting, but now that I know what I know, I can do other things to prevent that. It's like, no. It's like, now that he knows what he knows, he takes steps towards making that thing an inevitability. What it's like, but the way it's portrayed to me, I watch way too many comic book shows and read too many books to know the difference between a future that is actually set in stone. Like, if you know the future and then you try to work to prevent that future, the steps that you take to prevent that future are actually the steps that you took to make that future possible. And had you not taken those steps, that future would have never happened. So there's that way of dealing with future. Or you know the future, you could prevent the future from happening. Or in this case, you know the future, you're taking steps towards making that future an inevitability. And it seems like that's what he's doing. And also, even when he's in his blue Dr. Manhattan form after Angela wakes him up, he's still in the body and looks like Cal. And she even makes reference to that, like, you still look like him. And it also kind of alludes to the fact that before he chose the body of Calvin Jelani, I'm guessing he looked completely different. And that's why the camera never showed him, because you knew he was still being played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen, but it was before he chose that body, before he chose that form. So more than likely he looked completely different, and that's why they chose not to show his face until the very end, because by that point he was already in the body of Cal. And I'm thinking maybe it's because he's been in Cal's body for so long, and then also when he woke up and he was talking to Angela, he was saying he's a little confused of where and when he is, because he's had that little chip, quote unquote, in his mind for so long. So I'm guessing he's not at full 100% capacity yet, and perhaps that's why he still looks like Cal as opposed to his original form, because even when he's on Europa creating life and you see him all naked and in his Dr. Manhattan form pre-Cal, they never show his face, they just show his backside. And also with that, you got to see the origin of why he shows the Mr. Phillips and Mrs. Crookshanks, why he made those particular individuals. And I liked all that backstory that I got in this episode. But yeah, taking his cues from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this episode even had a post-credit scene where you got to see Adrian Veidt more or less having his face smashed in with tomatoes from all the Mr. Phillips and Miss Crookshanks, each one going up to him saying, Master, will you stay? And he always said no, said they were smashing tomatoes in his face. I'm not sure the significance of the tomatoes or if the tomatoes have any significance. You find out that the Game Warden was the original person, the Adam of this world. And I'm assuming the person that the Mrs. Crookshanks that was prosecuting him was the original Eve of this world. And in many ways, you kind of feel bad for them, because the man that created them, the man that gave them life, pretty much abandoned them. Their whole purpose in life, and the reason Dr. Manhattan created them, is to serve. If there's no one there to serve, they have no purpose. They have nothing to do. And so that's why they're so adamant on keeping Adrian Veidt there. That's why they keep saying that you can do whatever you want, so long as thou shalt not leave, because the last person we had here left us, and we can't go through that again. So you almost feel sad for these creatures, and I'm just like, oh, it's kind of... that sucks. But then Adrian Veidt brings up he has 8 million children on Earth, and I'm just like, who are these 8 million children? Because he's clearly not talking about the population of Earth, because there's way more than 8 million people on Earth. And then, again, a throwback to the first episode, you find that horseshoe that was placed into his cake. And so I'm like, are you really about to use a horseshoe to break out of concrete? How does that work? But yeah, but this is another blockbuster-like episode of Watchmen. I can't wait to see how the season finale plays out. Like, how is this episode going to end? Because I do feel like there's a lot of questions left on the table, and I'm wondering how they're going to wrap it up in this one episode, because where's Looking Glass? We haven't seen Looking Glass since what was it, episode 5? Also, we got to see Lube Man show up again, or as I call him, Condom Man. Like, for him to just show up in that one moment and then slide to the sewer, and then not to reference him ever again. No, he's got to show up again. And me, I think he's Petey, the FBI detective that Lori brought with her to Tulsa. And then, of course, what does the Millennium Clock do? What plans did Dr. Manhattan have with Will? And I personally believe, and I could be completely wrong with this, but they brought up how Dr. Manhattan can transfer his powers to another person, where if he puts his, like, say he could transfer his powers into a banana, and then if that person eats said banana, they will have his abilities. I feel like this show or this series or this season is going to end with him giving or bestowing Angela his powers before he dies or whatever, and thus she becomes the new Dr. Manhattan, and bringing their love story to a close in an almost tragic but bittersweet way. But yeah, like I said, I've been here for every single episode of this show. show. Like, every episode just continues to be great. It does things and goes places I just never expected this show to go to. But yeah, but like I said, I need to take like a screensaver of that moment of Yahya Abdul-Mateen being naked and like frame it on my wall. Because my God, that was beautiful. But anyway, have you guys seen Watchmen episode 8? What did you think about it? Also, what's been your favorite episode so far? I think my favorite episode is still the Hooded Justice backstory episode. But let me know down in the comment section below. Also, if you can, hit that thumbs up button and like this video to really help out the channel. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, please check out the other videos on my channel. And if you like what you see, please subscribe for more and hit that bell notification button so you're alerted every single time I post a new video. And tell your friends, families, and neighbors about my channel to help me continue to grow, just like Dr. Manhattan's dick. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.